I woke up Friday morning to the news that yet another school had had a shooting, this time in Texas. While I was watching the story unfold, nobody knew any details. Some people knew the name and people knew who had done it, but nobody was releasing the name until later on in the afternoon. But there had already been speculation going on as to what the motive was. It was unfortunately a lot of the same narrative. This guy was a loner, he'd been bullied, he'd been picked on. Before the name was released, everybody knew that he came in wearing a trench coat and had done so almost every day. Those were some of the first details that came out when the news came out that there was a shooting. The first thing I want to say is that my heart goes out to the families of Santa Fe, Texas. This was a terrible tragedy that nobody should have to go through, and my prayers are with you as you begin to recover what you've lost and mourn over the people that you will never be able to replace. And now I'd like to talk about the events that happened in the immediate aftermath of the shooting. Some of the events that started happening before most of the people that were involved in the shooting were pronounced dead. Like most people, the first thing that I saw about the shooting was a headline from my favorite news source on my phone saying that there had been a shooting in a small Houston suburb, and details were yet to come. I waited for a bit before I started following the story, knowing that the majority of the coverage was just going to be saying that there was a shooting over and over again, and a little bit of speculation as to what went on. A few hours afterwards, I joined a live stream from the local ABC station and started listening and started to try to piece together what had happened. Immediately before I tuned into the coverage of this story and tried to piece things together, I'd already been looking on online message boards and other forms of communication. I was sorely disappointed to see that many of the people that I follow and many of the people that I communicate with were already starting to say that this was just going to be another opportunity for the anti-gun left to try and strip away our Second Amendment rights through fear. However, I was unfortunately surprised when I tuned into the Houston local ABC station's live coverage of the event and was presented with a group of 4 anchors talking about what laws could be passed in order to prevent the next tragedy from happening. This was 2 hours before the name of the shooter was even released to the public. I took some time throughout the rest of the day and tried to follow along with the story as it developed. I wanted to see who was commenting on who this kid was and what the comments were looking like when they came out. I also took some time and engaged in some Twitter conversations and some conversations in other online messaging boards, and I saw a few things unfold as I was engaging in these discussions. Now, the first thing that obviously happened was that anti-gun advocates came out and started to yell for more gun control and stricter gun laws that they feel would have helped prevent this tragedy. And pro-gun advocates and Second Amendment enthusiasts came out and started yelling back at them, saying that more guns in the hands of more people would have also prevented this tragedy. Other people wanted to talk about bullying as soon as the shooting started, and still others wanted to talk about the alleged 22 school shootings that have happened thus far in 2018. And of course there was the tinfoil hattery that always comes around any sort of mass shooting that says that this was a government or CIA plot in order to come back and take away our guns. Now, as of right now, I don't want to talk about any theories as to why a junior in high school decided towards the end of his school year to come in and start shooting in an art class. There's a prevailing theory that I am starting to agree with, but the suspect is in custody right now and still has an opportunity to talk to his lawyer. He's still alive, and I don't want to taint anybody's opinions or any investigation. But I do want to take some time and talk about some of the backlash in the aftermath of the shooting, especially in the immediate aftermath. In light of the fact that there have been a series of facts and fictions that have flown around Twitter and other social media regarding this story, I do want to lay out a couple of facts that have been confirmed about this story, even if we don't talk about motive right now. At 7:23 a.m. on Friday, May 19th, 2018, police in Santa Fe, Texas responded to an active shooter event at Santa Fe High School. The timeline on this story is very short. By 8:03, the suspect had surrendered to police and had been taken into custody. I will refrain from using the suspect's name at this point. There are plenty of other media outlets that are using his name, and I will link a few of them in the description below. Suspect is reported to have used a shotgun, allegedly sawed off, and a .38 caliber revolver. This is being spoken in light of the fact that many people are quick to say that there was an AR-15 that was used on the scene. And as of current reporting, there are 10 people deceased and 10 people injured as a result of the shooting. Explosive devices such as pipe bombs and pressure cooker bombs have been reported to have been found on the Santa Fe High School campus, as well as off campus and near the suspect's home. So this is a fairly messy situation that's going to require an ongoing investigation before we have all of the facts that surrounded it. Politicians and the general citizenry alike were very quick to jump to media and social media platforms to try and find things to blame. The National Rifle Association and lax gun laws were, of course, two of the first things to be cited in the argument as to why the tragedy happened on Friday morning. But social media became alight almost immediately, with people on both sides of the gun debate screaming at each other and then retreating back to their tribes to discuss how to take down the other side once again. This is a phenomenon that I'd like to discuss because it seems to happen every time there's any sort of tragedy that goes on in the country. The first thing that always happens during the gun control argument is that both sides come out and try to dehumanize the other. Both sides of the argument claim that the other side wants to see more dead children in order to advance their agenda. I'm going to come out and be the arbiter of this and say that I don't believe that either side of the argument wants to see any more dead children. The problem with the argument is that we fundamentally disagree on what it's going to take to end the tragedies and stop the gun violence in schools problem. Now, people on the control side of the argument tend to gravitate towards the same idea. It's a numbers game. If there are fewer guns in circulation, that means that it will be harder for anybody who wants to either break the law or use a gun that he has obtained legally and commit a mass tragedy like this. Fewer guns means harder access. Now, on paper, I understand the idea. I've had a head for numbers for almost my entire life, and I understand the idea that if you take something out of circulation or reduce its numbers, you reduce the probability that an individual will be able to find it and put it in his hands. While I understand the methodology on paper, in real life it has no practicality. If somebody wants to cause harm, he's going to find a way to do it. And while a gun may not be an essential part of everyday life unless the government is intending to put tyranny on you, knives, pipes, pressure cookers, fertilizers, and ball bearings are essential parts of our lives and are a lot harder to ban, and people will have easier access to those without any sort of background check. The extreme other side of the argument is that there needs to be a gun in the hand of every law-abiding citizen in order to keep the non-law-abiding citizens in check. Now, this is obviously the most extreme case of the freedom side of the argument, and it has its flaws as well. Most importantly, the fact that not everybody in America is interested in having any sort of a gun. Many people in this country would rather wait for another citizen to protect him, or more likely a police officer to come in and be the protectorate. And in America, it's important to note that we have this choice. You can choose to live any lifestyle you wish. But it is important that we sit down and discuss these ideas and try to find a middle ground, because the shootings do continue to happen, and those are what need to be stopped no matter what. The statistics that are commonly reported right now show that there have been 22 school shootings in this country in 2018. I don't believe that is true. I believe the number is closer to 4. Fellow YouTuber Matt Christensen did a video discussing the details of the alleged school shootings up until Parkland, and I've linked that video in the description and at the end of this video, so you can go and check that out and see how you feel about the numbers. But I believe that it's closer to 4 at this point. But I'll accept the argument from people on the control side of the gun argument in that 4 is still too many, and we do need to do something about that. As the events of Parkland were starting to fizzle out, I posed a question on various forms of social media asking what people would think about having teachers armed in a classroom in the event of something like this happening again. I was very surprised when I found that I got a mostly positive response to this, especially from parents with children that are school-aged. When I posed the question, I was already formulating an idea as to how armed teachers would work and various regulations that we would have to have in place in order to make it work. The first thing I want to say is that armed teachers is in no way a replacement for highly trained school resource officers. A police officer should always be your first line of defense in any sort of emergency. However, one of the problems that arises with that is entirely tactical. The majority of school shootings that have happened as of late have involved one perpetrator. However, many of them in the past have involved two or more perpetrators. But even one shooter with tactical knowledge and a lucky shot can take down that resource officer and will most likely do that first. And at that point, he is free to move about the school and cause as much chaos as he wants with little to no resistance under our current system. Now, I want to take some time and agree with the control side of the gun argument. Universally arming teachers across the board indiscriminately is not a solution to anything. I would argue that the majority of teachers having guns in their hands in the event of a crisis would cause more harm than good, and there's even a select group of teachers, and I think a lot of people like to cite this group of teachers, that having a gun in their hand would cause more problems than anything whether or not there's a crisis. It may even cause a crisis of its own. But a solution that I considered would be to allow teachers to voluntarily arm and put some regulation behind it as well, just to make sure that no teacher is going to go off the handle, or at least it's going to be a restricted incident. There are teachers in this country that are firearms enthusiasts, and there are teachers in this country who have concealed carry weapons permits. That's no secret. And I believe a part of the solution to the school shooting problem would be to allow those teachers to get a license through the state and across the school board. You especially have to clear it with the school board in order to let them carry on campus. But there is one big issue that you do have to clear in order to make it tactically effective, and that is anonymity. Schools as they stand are a very soft target if somebody wants to come in and shoot the place up. You either go in with absolutely no resistance, or you have to take one person down and then you have no resistance in order to go through and cause whatever massacre you care to. But if a shooter has to stop and think, if I go down this hall, am I going to get shot? Or somebody going to start shooting back? It does put a slowdown onto the effect of the massacre, even if no teacher has the will or the ability to shoot back. Every moment of hesitation is another moment for first responders to come in and professionally assess and take down the situation, and another moment for more students to escape the carnage and get out of the building. But anonymity is the key in order for all of this to work. No student should know which one of his teachers are armed and which ones aren't, for two reasons. It creates a hostile learning environment and makes every student nervous in the school. And it also goes back to the soft target tactical argument that I made when I started describing this course of action. If a suspect knows which halls to avoid or which targets to take down first, he will just as easily be able to carry out as much of a massacre as if he was completely unrestricted going down the halls, considering that most massacres take place in under 15 minutes. And if a teacher should brag, or a student should find out that teacher should lose his license, because all that does is make a counterproductive situation in which the school goes back into being a soft target. This is obviously an oversimplified way to explain a plan that I've put into motion in my head, and it needs to be discussed both with the citizenry and people who have more experience in making laws than I do. But it's a good start, and I hope it starts a discussion, because the most important part of trying to change our society is going to be having a discussion calmly and not screaming at each other over social media. Do you have a proposal as to how to prevent the next school shooting? Or perhaps you have a commentary on this particular school shooting or the proposal that I put forward? I always welcome thoughtful and productive discussion in the comment section below, or especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlogTwitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for taking the time to listen to this show and support this channel. And always remember, Never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care, everyone.